Well, first, happy holidays, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come out and meet with us this evening. We are basically at the 60% engineering level. And so this is a really important time to meet and go over the plans as they stand right now. I know that Chris Duza and Mike have met with a number of people in the area that specifically those people where we would need drainage easements. So some of you may have had conversations, some of you may have not yet. I don't think, Chris, you've met with quite a few people, right? So we'll walk through the plans this evening, and we'll answer some general questions, but really the intent is that if you have a specific question about your property, the plans are on the back table. We'll move that table out so you can get around and be here to answer any specific questions that you might have. Because the next step that we move to is to begin securing the easements. And I want to introduce Shanique Colby with Tierra Right-of-Way Services. And is that Nikki with, or is that, that's not Nikki, that's your daughter, okay. I meant to say, is it Kendall? Yeah. So, and Tierra Right-of-Way Services is working with us to secure the easements, just because we need people to be out there and meeting with you. And but it's really important tonight that they are not engineers. They manage that right-of-way process for us. So it's really important tonight that you meet with Chris, that you meet with Mike, if you have questions, and they'll talk about what respective pieces they're managing in the neighborhood. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. So I included this quote in the last couple of meetings that we've done because, this whole process does really, for good, bad, or ugly, it binds us together, right? We're all trying to work to accomplish a goal of reducing down the threat to lives, reducing down the threat to homes, to properties. And it's all connected, and you're going to hear that over and over, as you've heard all along, that we're attempting to build a mitigation system, and that system element is really crucial. And you're a key part of the system because this is your property, and that's what we're trying to mitigate. And we know that everybody's sustained a lot of impacts, and our goal is to try to reduce. We can't eliminate any potential for a loss in the future, but we're doing our darndest to try to reduce down that loss. And the team's worked really, really hard. We've got a lot going on right now. Obviously, we're working on both Copeland and Peaceful and Government Tank all at the same time. So there's a lot of work going on, a lot of long days, a lot of long nights. So tonight's goals, we'll walk through the status. I'll take a few minutes to provide some overview, which I'll do very quickly. And then the meat of it tonight is Mike Carrolley with Natural Channel Design Engineering will go over the plans, the proposed plans for On Forest. Probably many of you have seen that we've been constructing restoring a very large fan up high up above the 420 road. You can actually see it from the highway, and it's 40 acres. This is the largest fan that we've ever restored, and that's going to have a tremendous amount of benefit to you, to the road, long term. So, but the remainder of the work within On Forest, from the 420 road down to the neighborhood, we have to have the drainage easements to be able to pursue that work. So, because we have to have somewhere for the water to go through the neighborhood safely. Mike will cover that, and then Chris Duza will cover the off forest. I think Mike will probably also touch on. He's working on the overflow channel on the northern side of the Peaceful Way corridor what we call the mini Grand Canyon, and he'll touch on that tonight as well. So, and then Corey Helton with J.E. Fuller will review the no adverse impact analysis. As you know, any of the proposed projects go through a very rigorous analysis to make sure that we're not creating either upstream or downstream impacts, adverse impacts. And he'll walk through what that looks like. I'll give you a preview. It looks good. And then I'll finally cover some of the final steps relative to the drainage easement. So, I think everyone's aware coming out of Schultz that we had worked with the corridor. There was a decision not to move forward by the corridor. Now we're moving forward post pipeline, and think, like I said, I think we're making really good progress. And I'll say that it is a blessing, and a blessing that we didn't have flooding this summer, that you didn't have to sustain the impacts. And it's a blessing that we could focus and get a lot of work done. Mr. Garrison with Tiffany got a tremendous amount of work done this summer, spring, summer, and now into fall. But it's also easy for people to lapse and think, well, maybe it's all going to be okay. But it really was a product of we just didn't have any rainfall. We had very little rainfall. And that probably won't happen again next year. You've seen this chart and the increases that have been sustained across the flood area, including in the Peaceful Way flood area. I do want to highlight these principles because I think you're going to see that again tonight, is this integrated design, the integrated design of what are the measures that we employ on forest, which are really designed to reduce sediment and debris coming into the neighborhood so that whatever we construct through the neighborhood will actually function. If we didn't do the on-forest measures, nothing we would do downstream would work. And so that on-forest measures are really critical. They also do reduce the volume of water. That varies throughout the season depending upon how saturated the soils are and so forth. And we can't measure that very well, so it doesn't get reflected very well in the modeling, meaning that we always usually see a much more positive impact than actually the modeling. The modeling is, we consider it pretty conservative. We're targeting, and we're remaining to target a 2-inch and 45-minute rainfall event. That's a 25-year storm. If those of you that were around during Schultz know, then we only had the resources to target a 5-year post-wildfire. This is 25-year post-wildfire. But I want to add to this is that we do have a limited amount of budget. And right now, the proposed that you're going to see tonight is over budget. So we're beating the cost down as much as we can with the goal of trying to still bring that 25. We may not make it. We didn't make it in Mupaki. We had to ratchet back the mitigation. And instead of reaching the 25-year goal, we ended up more like about 18, 20-year goal. Still had a tremendous impact, positive impact. Some of you may be aware of both Brandis and Mupaki trails. And I think that video is in here. We'll show you the video. They sustained a 3-inch in an hour event last year, or this season. That was frankly the only big event, only real event of any magnitude that we had. And everything performed exceptionally well, both on and off forest. And again, securing the drainage easements is really key so that we can get, and Mr. Garrison with Tiffany Construction, he will work as much through winter as anybody possible can. He's pretty amazing. So want to share this. So let's see, should it? So this is the fan up above Wupaki Trails. That was widened. It was there prior, post-Schultz, but we enlarged it significantly. And you can see the water spreads out, slows down, drops out at sediment. Part of the water goes to the left down through a new channel that was enlarged. That channel was constructed also post-Schultz. I'm going to run it again. Whoop. No, I want to go back. Let's see if it'll let me run that again. There we go. So you can see this is why it's so important on forest. It's spreading out, slowing down, dropping out the sediment debris. And then there's also, it's designed that terminal trench that gathers up the water is designed. Part of the water goes to a secondary fan on the west side of the development, and that goes into a storm drain system, which is going to be, this is going to be, well, very similar. It's not going to be bifurcated, right, Mike? It's going to be all going into a storm drain system and through your corridor. And again, they'll talk more about that. This is what came down through the channel during this event. This was the 3-year event on July 30th, 3-inch event on July 30th. It really actually is a 100-year rainfall event. And you can see this is kind of the flush coming down, but if anybody ever drove up into Wupaki when they had the events in 22, I mean, there was massive debris everywhere. It plugged up that culvert every single time, water went everywhere. And you can see there was probably about 30 feet of very small debris that came down. Again, that's the product of the on-forest work. And then this is the other flow path that goes into the storm drain on the western side of Wupaki Trails. That's the inlet for the storm drain. And it's coming off that secondary fan. And it never got beyond, probably it was about a half full. I was there through the whole event, and it was probably half. I will tell you that I have never seen a set of more relieved people in my life. They had been watching the gauges, and they knew it was coming. They had seen the 3 inches, and they were all out there. Well, now what's going to happen, you know? And it was really sweet. They sent me a photo afterward. Of all smiles and thanking us for having gotten the work done. Tiffany finished the storm drain Tuesday, and this happened Sunday. So that's how hard, I mean, they were pushing 7 days a week, very long days, to get this work done. So as I indicated, we're at the 60% engineering level and pushing hard to keep things moving. And you're going to see the actual design tonight. Again, it's a storm drain system, and then with an overflow channel, swale channel plan for the northern flow path, the current northerly flow path. Because, you know, there could be events that will overwhelm the system, right? I mean, that can still happen. We're not going to be able to mitigate every event. Of course. The potholing for utilities, Alan Adams is out potholing the northern conveyance in Copeland right now, and I think he's going to be finishing that up. I don't know, Mike, if you've talked to him. He's pretty close to finish up, so he'll be moving over to Peaceful here soon, and he's potholing for utilities so that we know how deep they are, where are they. Some of the utilities have very good maps about where their utilities are. Others don't have anything. So that's a really important element of the engineering, is to know where is everything and what has to be relocated and what's the strategy. Fortunately, he's very good at dealing with that. As I mentioned here, right-of-way services, they will be the ones contacting those of you that we need easements from. And we're getting those documents prepared now. And then as we have those ready, then they will be out to meet with you. Again, work with Chris to get your questions answered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. And he'll talk about the plan on forest. I guess you have to hold the mic though too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Working? Yeah. So, forward here, just a review for a lot of you. I think most of you have been to the previous meetings, but just kind of a review of why are we doing all the on-forest work, and what's our current condition up above the neighborhood. And we have, you know, the alluvial fans that are on the east flank of the peaks, due to the Schultz fire and then due to the pipeline fire, have been severely degraded. All those alluvial fans have been cut through with the channels and deep gullies that you see, and other channels where their function has been degraded, where the function that they had before was to spread the water out, drop the sediment out. And before the Schultz fire, you guys were largely not seeing any significant flows. It was a very complacent watershed. But post Schultz and pipeline, we've got very efficient channels now that deliver both water and sediment to the neighborhood in very short order. And the incision that we've seen, you know, just left as is, if we didn't do any mitigation up there, didn't do any restoration, it would take, literally, it'd take decades for that forest to recover by itself. And so the goal, as Lucinda already said, the goal of the work that we're doing is to reduce the sediment delivery, sediment sourcing, and sediment transport from the forest to the neighborhoods, to the infrastructure that Chris is designing, the storm drains. Because otherwise, with the amount of sediment that you guys saw last year from all those storms, that would be the sediment that would go into the infrastructure that's going to be built, and it would just serve to clog that up and make it not function. So what we're planning on doing is take these incised channels that go through the alluvial fans and grade it on out and restore what is a channel back into an alluvial fan so that you get the water to spread out, just like the video that you saw a few minutes ago. This picture is from the museum fire on the other side of the mountain that Tiffany construction, we designed and Tiffany constructed in 21 or 22. But, and it's seen some storm events on it, and it's functioned very well. But that's the goal for the watershed above the Peaceful Way neighborhood, is to take everything that's looks like a disaster zone and spread it out into and create alluvial fans up there. So our 60% level plans for what we're going to do on the forest, just to orient everybody, this is not a very good slide as far as coming across on the screen, but this right here is the 420 road, Schultz Pass Road on the left, and the neighborhood boundary is right down here. We basically, about half the distance from the 420 road to the neighborhood, we're going to restore that and enhance it as an alluvial fan. Above that, the valley type isn't anything that we can create. We can create more alluvial fan, but we can stabilize that channel so that the banks don't continue to calve off and source sediment to send it on downstream. So we can reduce the sediment sourcing upstream, and we can certainly stop the sourcing through here, and even by way of the alluvial fan, we can have a fair amount of the sediment drop out and store that sediment up there instead of sending it into the neighborhood. It's just short of a mile. I think it's like 4,000 feet from here down to the neighborhood. Taking what is right now a 20-foot wide to 60-foot wide gully that comes down through here and turning it into a 150 to 200-foot wide alluvial fan. When we get down close to the neighborhood, that's where we'll have one of those terminal trenches that will split flow and bring it down into the storm drain infrastructure down this direction. And then everything above and beyond the design storm will overflow into an overflow fan before it gets into going into the neighborhood downstream and basically fall into the channels, into the general alignments that are there now. I don't have any slides relative to what we're planning on doing for that the Grand Canyon, but essentially we're going to take what is a gully with vertical banks and restore it back with some side slopes, perhaps a little bit less depth, and make sure it's at a geometry that will pass whatever sediment it does actually get to it through without clogging up, as has been seen last year and even this year too. A lot of that sediment came down there and reduced the capacity of the channel down through the neighborhood. But so that overflow channel will still be there from the forest boundary down to Glen Drive, but we'll take that and get rid of the vertical banks and make it more of a, what I call, I'll just say we'll naturalize it, make it a little bit less like a disaster zone. This is a little bit of detail where our alluvial fan ends. We'll have a terminal trench, and then a splitter that sends the design storm flow, whatever the storm drain ultimately can handle. We will send that. It'll split off of here, and then if we have too much flow, a 3-inch storm event or larger, then the above and beyond flow just continues on down through here. Fair amount of rock grade control. These are all rock sills that will work to keep that sloping plane a sloping plane without the gullies reforming into it. There's a lot of rock in there. Mr. Garrison knows that story, and he's wondering how he's going to find all that rock. And so what do these improvements look like? There's a lot of mass grading, a lot of earthwork that happens to take those gullies and restore the alluvial fans. Like I said, we're taking what is a 20 to 60 foot wide gully and expanding it out to 150 foot wide to 200 foot wide sloping plane from midway from the 420 all the way down to the neighborhood. This is, there's also a lot of rock that goes in there, like I said. The terminal trench, this is one of those terminal trenches where the water comes from, it's coming from the right, slopes down a rock face, a riprap face, into the channel before exiting out into the transition channel to go to the neighborhood infrastructure. So the channel grade control up above, a lot of rock again up there, a lot of crossvein weirs. I think a lot of you have seen those if you hiked up there into some of the other watersheds that have been treated. A lot of 48-inch to 60-inch or larger rocks in these chevron-shaped crossvein weirs. This one is being installed. This one is after it's seen some flow. I think that's probably the Campbell watershed, where it just holds the channel bottom, make sure it doesn't downcut any further, and holds the channel form. On the alluvial fan itself, we have a lot of rock sills where they grade straight across the alluvial fan and then install rocks all the way across. We've got two different types of rock sills. We have one, we call it a burrito wrapped sill, where it's it's 3 foot wide, 4 foot deep, with some fairly large riprap going inside of that, and it's wrapped with filter fabric. The other rock sills are a large rock, either 30-inch diameter or 36-inch diameter, depending upon the flows we expect to see. That'll sit in there and hold the grade of the alluvial fan. Once all the earthwork is done, then we reseed everything and we apply a layer of mulch to the alluvial fan to help restore or help foster the establishment of vegetation. The vegetation is a key component to that sediment reduction over time. In 3 to 5 years, as we get a full reestablishment of the native grasses, that does as much to reduce the sediment as the rest of the work that went into it with all the rock and changing the grades. And that's all I have. Off to Chris Duza.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So I'm Chris Duza with Civil Tech Engineering. I know I've met with a lot of you folks out at your properties. It's good to see a lot of the familiar faces again. So a little bit, I know some of this is a recap of what Lucinda had talked about, but this watershed, the Peaceful Watershed, did burn back in 2010 as a result of the Schultz fire. There was no post-wildfire mitigation constructed, either on forest or off forest, after the Schultz fire. This watershed again reburned in the pipeline and the tunnel fires back in 2022. So where we're at right now with the hydrologic modeling is that 2-inch in 45-minute storm basically at the interface between the forest and the neighborhood produces about 1,500 cubic feet per second. So, and that's a clear flow discharge. So if you can imagine a box 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot, that's a cubic foot, 1,500 cubic feet moving by you in a second per second. So it's a lot of water that's coming out of the watershed. Currently, there's some split flows that occur at the forest boundary. On the next slide, you'll be able to see those split flows a little bit better. So this is the main peaceful flow coming out of the watershed. This is about that 1,500 CFS that I was talking about. And you can see where it's coming into the neighborhood that some of the flow is splitting off to the north, some of the flow is splitting off to the south, some of the flow is continuing straight forward. The different colors on the map that you see here represent areas that are inundated by floodwater. The lighter colors, the lighter blue, is shallower depths. The yellow, the reds, those are deeper depths of flow that you see there. Okay. So again, about 1,500 CFS coming for the forest. This is the alignment for our storm drain, this red, which will be picked up at the Forest Service boundary, come down through here, and that'll empty out into the Copeland basins. Okay. So a little bit about the design considerations for the storm drain. We're looking at a very large pipe to carry that much water. It's a 120-inch diameter pipe, so that's a 10-foot diameter pipe. It's a circular pipe. It's corrugated metal pipe. It's a special type of pipe that has a very smooth interior that allows the water to move through faster than a typical corrugated metal pipe. So what we're trying to do, if you Lucinda had mentioned, this is a very integrated approach. So everything that Mike's doing up on the forest is really aimed at spreading the water out, slowing the water down, getting the sediment and the debris to fall back out in the forest instead of out, through the neighborhoods like you're seeing now. But then when we hit the interface with the neighborhood, I'm kind of doing just the opposite. So I want to speed the water up, right? Because the faster I can move the water through the neighborhood, the smaller footprint of the improvements I need. So I'm trying to get this water, and this water will move, at that design flow of, 1,500 CFS, that water's moving through that pipe at about 30 feet per second. So even if we get some limited amount of sediment and debris coming from the forest, the idea is that we can still push it through that pipe because it's going to have a lot of force behind it, right? So unfortunately through the neighborhood, there really is no drainage infrastructure, certainly not anything that would handle this amount of water, as you're well aware of. So we do need the easements. We need the easements that'll go through the private properties. And I know when I initially met with people, I think we discussed, a 20-foot easement, maybe a 30-foot easement. With this size of pipe and the trenching, now that we have the contractor on board, we will need a 30-foot easement in total. And so what we're doing with the storm drain alignment, as you saw there, we're splitting it along the property lines. So we're really looking at a 15-foot easement on each side of the property. Again, we're looking at a 10-foot diameter pipe. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, with your trench boxes, this won't be a trench, that's laid back with side slopes really far laid back. We'll be using vertical trench box, steel trench boxing, and that'll be about 2 feet outside of the pipe on each side, roughly. Um, but the contractor does need some room in there, to maneuver. So we're looking at a 30-foot total drainage easement, again, 15 feet on both sides of the property line. So other things that we need to consider with the design of this pipe. Again, I talked a little bit about, we really want to minimize the amount of sediment and debris that can be deposited in the pipe and clog the pipe. We want to be able to transport that through. So very key to our work, even if we put in a very large pipe like this, without that work on the forest, that's really because we have essentially an unlimited supply of sediment that's coming from the forest, right? So until we're able to, essentially take, like Mike said, something that may take decades or a century to do on its own naturally, Mike and his crews are going to get up there and we're going to try to accelerate this healing process into a month or two, is essentially what we're trying to do. So it's key for me to be able to, transport any, small amount of sediment or small size sediment through the pipe. That flow in Wapaki that Lucinda had showed on the video, you saw that was immediately after the work was done there and the vegetation really hadn't been restored. But you saw the water was pretty murky, kind of looked like chocolate milk coming down through there. So it was carrying a lot of sediment, but that's actually the 6-foot diameter pipe. After that flow, you could see we had very little sediment deposition just along the flow line of the pipe. So we felt pretty good about that. Some other things, that we're going to have to deal with is going to be fencing. I know I've talked to a lot of you about fencing. Being that we're splitting the property lines, there's typically fencing along this property line. So we will have to be removing fencing, but we'll be putting it back as well. And that's what we consider to be a non-eligible cost in terms of our federal funding partners. They don't pay for any of that. So that'll be funded by the flood control district. We try to avoid the removing of existing trees as much as we possibly can, but the reality is, there will have to be some trees that are along this alignment that we'll have to remove. And I think I've spoken to quite a few of you about tree removal and, the possibility of trying to save trees and even replacing some trees. Obviously not with the same size or in kind, but, trying to do things to minimize that impact to the removal of trees. We won't be changing any of the elevations for roadways and driveways. We're going to leave those right where they're at. So this pipe is buried underground. So once we bury it underground, if it's under a driveway or a road or even, along your fence line, we're going to restore the ground surface back to how it was originally. Maybe before the floods had cut through there, put the fencing back, and then we'll also be hydro-seeding or seeding those areas that we disturb so that the vegetation will grow back. So, we're really trying to make the process as easy as we can on the homeowners. Construction of a project this size and a pipe this size isn't easy, but hopefully when we're done, and we've moved out of the construction area and things start to regrow and revegetate, hopefully it'll look like it did before the fires and before the floods, and it'll be a little bit more back to normal for you guys. Utility relocations, like Lucinda said, the stuff we get from the utility companies are plus or minus 200 feet at best in most cases. I don't think they know where their utilities are. So we're out there locating the utilities right now. You've probably seen like gray posts in the ground. And contractor out there, they're doing what's called potholing. So they're actually locating those utilities and where the depths are. And so now as we move past the 60% design, we'll really start honing in on the design and trying to avoid those utilities as best as we can. Because again, utility relocations, not only are they very expensive, they're non-eligible costs for our federal funding partner. So the flood control district has to pay for that. So we're working to try to avoid those utility relocations. In circumstances, there will be places where we will have to relocate utilities, and Mike and his group will, be working with individual homeowners if we have to move your water service and you may be out of water, for about 4 hours at a time. But we would coordinate that sort of stuff with you guys. Mentioned a little bit about grading some of these incised channels that have formed, especially, further to the north towards Brandis. The one that they call the mini Grand Canyon, you guys have probably seen. It's got to be a good 20 or 30 feet wide and 10 or 15 feet deep there. A lot of vertical side slopes. It seems to erode every time it gets flow in these channels. They're dangerous, so we want to maintain those as secondary overflow paths for things that exceed the capacity of the storm drain. So we'll be doing some grading on those channels like Mike mentioned, and he and his group are working on that. One of the things that we have to do with our federal funding partner through this entire process is prove out a positive cost-benefit ratio for this, and that has to do with your property values and the things that we're mitigating and the money that we're spending to do this. But it all has to pencil out at the end of the day to be a positive cost-benefit ratio to use that funding. And then, of course, Corey's going to talk a little bit about the no adverse impacts modeling. And so I'll give you a little preview of that. So basically, what it means is because of the construction we do, because of all this work we do, we can't have adverse impacts on anybody's property through the corridor. So we can't send water across the surface of the ground in greater velocities or depths where it wasn't occurring or in an increased capacity pre-improvement as opposed to post-improvement. So Corey will talk a little bit about those models. So Corey and his group, J.E. Fuller and Associates is a separate engineering firm. They take the designs that we work on and that Mike works on, and then they independently run their analysis so that we're sure that there's no bias on our designs. Okay. A little bit about the alignment, and this is the plans are back there, on the table. But we have, if you're wondering about the alignment and exactly where it is, we have your parcel numbers and your names and addresses on there. But basically, this is the storm drain alignment, that's splitting that property line. And then this is where we make that bend, and we come down and we empty into the Copeland basins. So it's really great from the standpoint that we don't have any bends, because everywhere, especially with that large of a pipe and that much water flowing through it, everywhere we have bends, we have hydraulic losses in the pipe, and it's not able to carry as much water. So we really don't like bends. Hydraulically, it's not a good thing. So it works out pretty well, but you'll see in our model what happens at those bends. So this is the model of the storm drain down here. This is the inlet up here, and these are those bends down at the bottom that you'll see down here. And when I start to run the model, you'll see that, the real trick in the model is for us to get that much water, 1,500 CFS, into the pipe. It's hard to force that much water into the inlet of the pipe. You'll see that the water surface, or the hydraulic grade, what we call, will build above the pipe, which means that actually that pipe will be flowing as a pressurized pipe when that happens. And then for the vast majority of the pipe, it'll flow as an open channel, or it won't be pressurized. But as we start building these hydraulic losses down at those bends, you'll see that it'll turn into a pressure flow situation again. So So this is the hydrograph being routed through the pipe through time. You see how the water starts to build, see how it builds towards the top and where we're getting that pressure flow down towards the bottom. So the entire hydrograph of this 1,500 CFS, it's relatively short. It's maybe a half hour, the hydrograph. And so, there'll be a period of time of minutes, maybe five to 10 minutes, where we'll have some pressure flow situation in that pipe. So interesting for engineers and people who like hydraulics, right? So a little bit about those. I mentioned, some of that that secondary overflow grading. These areas in red are really the areas that we're focused on right now. This green is our storm drain alignment coming down in the Copeland basins. But you can see with the aerial imagery, these really incised channels. And actually this one here too as well. But these are those deeply incised, dangerous channels through here and through here as well. And so those are some of the areas that Mike's working on. Okay. So with that, I'll turn it over to Corey.
Good evening. I'm Corey Helton with J. Fuller Hydrology. I've been with the company for over 20 years now, and we installed the initial rain gauges. I was part of that team installing the rain gauges after the Schultz fire. I've been involved with the modeling that you've seen over the years with the Schultz, and I've been doing the modeling for that we'll be looking at this evening. I'm going to touch on the non-adverse criteria, then I'm going to kind of review what kind of rainfalls you guys have seen on the rain gauges, and then I'll show you the results from there. So as part of the non-adverse impact analysis, it's an approach by which the action of any community or property owner, public or private, will not adversely affect the property rights of others. And so that's what we're looking at. We're taking guidelines from the national level and implementing it to here. This NAI has been in place since the Schultz. It's the same sort of criteria that we've been using for the Schultz, the museum, the pipeline, the tunnel. All of those fires are fitting within this NAI criteria. So what we're looking at is the water depth for a 1-inch storm event in 45 minutes, which is about a 2 to 5 year storm event. We don't want to see an increase in depths greater than 1/10 of a foot. As we get a larger storm or 2-inch storm event for the 25 year, we don't want to exceed the depths of more than 1/2 a foot. And then for the 3-inch or 100-year storm event, we don't want to be increasing the depths by a foot. Water velocity is another important criteria. Anything above 3 feet per second is erosive, so it'll start moving sediment. Grasses can't establish themselves in areas that are greater than 3 feet per second. And so once we cross that criteria, we don't want to be increasing your velocity by more than 1 foot per second or 10% of the pre-project condition. So that's the criteria that I'll be looking at. So I wanted to touch on also like what you've seen as far as storm events. I'll first start off with, we're at about 7,000 feet right here. The waterline road that you can see up on the mountain is about 9,000 feet. The very tops of your mountain that were burned are more on the order of 11,000 feet. So the waterline road is only halfway up your watershed. So anything down up above that is a lot steeper. If you have high burn severity in that area, that upper half is where you're going to have the most runoff that's potential coming off from that area. So we have the rain gauges along the waterline road. With this one, we've also installed some more stations up above about 10,500 feet. So getting close to the very top. So in your first summer, you had quite a few events, and that was for a lot of the watersheds had a lot of events, but they were all on the order of 1 inch or less. So we're on this lower criteria, this 1 foot, 1 inch storm event. This summer, Wapaki, as well as you guys, did have a larger storm event, but it wasn't north of the waterline road. The center was at the waterline road, but that upper portion of your watershed was really only on the inch. So you had a big storm event down on the lower half, but you didn't really have a really large storm event on the upper half. So I wanted to describe what you've seen to kind of give you a sense of when we're looking at these results now, how would that look for the storm events that you've had so far? So keep in mind, overall, what's driving these models, you really haven't had an event bigger than a 1-inch event in the last 2 seasons. So this is what the model would suggest a 1-inch would look like. Here is Brandis. And here is Peaceful coming in. So the fan that Mike was talking about would be upstream here. The terminal trench will be in this area. And a lot of the flows are coming down after the fan through here. And here's your Grand Canyon. So you got your depths. The yellows and oranges are on the order of 4 feet deep. So you got some depth going there, and then it's shallower as it spreads out. So you got quite a bit of flow. With the designs that we're looking at, this is what it would look like. It would all be captured within the storm drains, and it would be coming down to the Copeland Basin. Coming down to the Copeland Basin here, and you can see you have more depths in the Copeland Basin because these would be expanded and deepened and filling this up. This is your terminal trench coming in here, and your pipe inlet would be right at this location. And so all the flows coming off the forest for the 1-inch event or similar flows that you've seen, rain events that you've seen so far, would be all captured within the storm drain. How does that look with the NAI criteria? So you can see where it gets deeper. It gets deeper in the basin. On the fan, it gets spread out. It's not as central flow coming through the middle. It gets more spread out and gets deeper on the edges. And then you got your terminal trench where you're capturing all the flows and diverting it. That's where you're getting more depth. It's contained, and then it goes under the ground at the storm drain. So that's your 1-inch event. 2-inch event, it gets much more flow. You got more depths in coming down through the Grand Canyon. You got more flows spreading out. It's inundated in a lot of locations. This is an event that you have not seen yet. What would it look like with the storm drain? So from Brandis, you can see you would still have flows escaping the Brandis channel and coming over through here, but there's really no flow, no significant depths. The depths are less than a half a foot through the Grand Canyon area. So that's just to keep in mind. I think this is another place to kind of point out. These depths aren't greater than what they would be before, but this is an area that I suspect if this project continues, this would be an area that we would improve on and get more flows to come down towards the storm drain rather than escaping off of the forest right through here. So I would imagine that if we can keep with the 10-foot diameter pipe in this location, that we can even dry this up even further in this location. But these are based off of the 60% plans, and so we have some more room as long as we get the right-of-ways to make further modifications to improve in these locations. How does that look on the NAI criteria? So depths are greater in the fan areas and also again in the Copeland Basin. Hopefully we never get the 3-inch event on areas up really large, up really high up in the watershed. This is what it would look like if without any mitigation measures, and you can see it decreases, but still you still have a lot of flow through the neighborhood. You would start getting flows to come out of the fan in similar paths that you have seen already if you were to hit the 3-inch event. But it's not worse than it was without the improvements. And this is what the depth differences would look like. Again, it's within the fan area. You can see some depths on the forest after the fan area on this here still exceeding, but by the time you get into the parcels, the depth criteria is met. And then again, in the Copeland Basin is where you see your greater depths. But that's our NAI criteria for each of the 1, 2, and 3-inch events.
Thanks, Greg. Okay. So a lot of information. I want to thank all three of them. A lot of work's gone into this. Modeling these storm drains is not an easy process. So as we've mentioned, key next step is securing the drainage easements. So, you know, my hope is that we can begin doing that within the next few weeks. We've got to produce those documents, and part of that is tonight. If there are any unresolved issues or questions or concerns that you have, again, get with Chris, Rick Schroeds, and Nick is in the back as well. You know, talk through with them if you have concerns. One thing I want to say is we are extremely tight on budget, and that may end up influencing what we can do. But again, we're going to try to deliver this 25-year storm if we can. And, you know, in terms of like cost to replace trees, we really don't have any funding to do that. There just isn't the funding to do that. We're pinching every penny to get into the construction, and we're talking millions of dollars. This is, you know, this is a huge investment that we're going to be making in this corridor. You know, I think upwards of about, you know, 8 or 9 million. So it's a lot of money. So with that, we start working through, but as soon as we get those drainage easements, that then frees him up to start working both on and off forest potentially. And I can tell you, there isn't anybody that runs a better construction operation than this gentleman. He's pretty amazing. And, you know, we've got to move through those processes of getting approval. We've had tremendous cooperation, both from the Forest Service and from NRCS. They've been great partners, working really well with us. Things are moving very, very well on those fronts. And with the costs, you know, we have a set of budgets for each of the projects. If we're within that budget, we still need to take those construction costs to the board and get approval. But either way, we're going to have to go through that process. But hopefully we can beat this budget into submission and make a run for this. So drainage easements, you've heard this before. We're spending all the money we have on construction. We don't have funding to purchase easements. We didn't purchase easements during Schultz. We're not purchasing easements now. But you will be provided with a valuation of the value of that easement based on, you know, open ground, undeveloped, your home doesn't add to that value. It's open ground, and you'll get that valuation as part of the easement process. Tierra will provide that, and you are eligible for a potential income tax deduction as a result of donating that easement to the district, to a government. It's like donating to a nonprofit similarly. Whether or not you're eligible, whether or not you qualify and can take advantage of that is something you'll need to work out with your tax preparer. We're not tax experts, but you are eligible. We'll provide you with the documentation so you can go and pursue that. And people, certainly through Schultz, lots of people did that. So that will be a part of that process. Again, tonight, key, if you've got any remaining concerns or questions, get with the engineers, because again, when Shanique and her team are out, they're going to be there to hopefully get your signature, and we can start moving forward with the project. That'll be the goal. So probably, I think we talked about that. We'll reestablish the fences. We don't have really any money to mitigate any of the other impacts. You know, we see this as we're providing a service, and it needs to reflect what you can all agree to as well, right? So that's part of that process. I really want to appreciate, I know Chris has been out to meet with many of you, and I think we've got a pretty good sense of some pretty good support and cooperation for those that need to provide easements. And I really want thank you for that, for work, you know, think about this working together as a community to deliver a service that is of value to everyone. Because just like we saw after Schultz, got the projects done, and we saw pretty positive benefit in terms of property values. Certainly the market was turning around then too, but in terms of the activity, there had been no activity, and that returned fairly quickly. So this does matter. We know this matters. So hopefully you'll continue to work with us, and we can, you know, move forward with the project, because I think we've got, you know, be able to deliver a significant amount of benefit. Yeah, Monica.
Are you gonna have some type of ish schedule so we'll know?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, we'll let you know
Yeah, to
well in advance. And what'll happen is Chris and Mike will go out and they'll walk the entire corridor. And, you know, if there are any specific issues or concerns that they'll work with you specifically. He has done every corridor except one since the beginning of Schultz. And I can count on less than one hand, I'll say, how many calls I've gotten. Because he works really well with people. He communicates. His team they're big on communicating. They will work with you if you have animals, or you need to pin them up while they're working or whatever. They'll work with you, and they'll be there to communicate with you. They're really respectful of your property. Like I said, we just did all the work in Wupaki and Brandis, got 0 complaints. I didn't get one single complaint. And I told everybody, hey, we're pushing really hard to get that work done before months. We're pushing really, really hard. And, you know, work with them. Don't, you know, like, be conscious about, you know, getting in the way, and be cooperative. He's going to need every piece of help he can to complete that project. And people did. Everybody cooperated. It got done, and it worked. So, and, you know, we've done a lot of work. I just want to also mention, we've done a lot of work on Brandis, and that is reflected in this modeling, but again, you don't see the full benefit of what you're getting out of On Forest. And, you know, for the 3-inch event that we had out there, for Brandis and Wupaki, it did go higher up on the mountain, not fully on the mountain, but it did go much higher up on the mountain. And I'll tell you, we still had a lot of capacity in Brandis. So that On Forest work is really working. We expanded the fans up there, and we did work in the channel and expanded the channel. So that's benefiting this area as well. So yeah, Karina.
I had no idea they were staying. So my dogs almost bit him. So is there a way that we can?
Yeah, they should go up. They should be communicating with you.
Okay, I didn't get communication.
Yeah, no, they usually it's a separate company that does the blue staking. What is it called? Elm something? Yeah, I'll remind the utilities that they need to be letting people know.
Okay. thank
Yeah,
you.
they should be letting you know. But yes, they'll come through and they'll do the locates before Alan Adams Trenching comes in to actually do the potholing. So But I expect he'll probably start, what, Mike, probably next week in the Peaceful area? Yeah. And Alan's been around here, if anybody's in construction, Alan's been around here for, I don't know, a lot of years. So he's usually pretty good. You'll see him out and about. If you see him, stop and say, hey, are you going to be doing anything? He's got a plan from Chris that he follows. So any other general questions? And then we'll break to let everybody look at the plans. Any other general? Yes, sir.
I understand the service ideology, and the desire for communication. I would say on our end of it, I feel like I haven't gotten good communication from you. From Chris, I met with you. You were fantastic. I appreciate it. And thank you for answering questions. I know I've left you voicemails and have not gotten any responses, and that's disheartening.
I certainly don't recall. I'll get your name afterwards.
That's all right. That's all right. I would say it is a service that we do pay for, with our taxes and everything to it. I understand the
Well, the
reciprocity.
entire county pays
Yes.
for this.
Yeah, and I understand the reciprocity.
Yeah.
You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and I'm happy to help out where I can. I think communication would be appreciated and not letting us feel like we're just in this alone. I know during the flooding, didn't get anything from the county, but we're moving forward and I appreciate it, so.
Well, we're sending out weekly updates. So if you're not getting the email weekly updates, then please see Sean. Sean, raise your hand. Make sure we have your email address back there because we're sending out weekly updates. And really right now, while we're in engineering, the critical communication is coming from him. That's what, that and the weekly updates. And then we do, we did the 30% meeting, now we're doing the 60% meeting. I mean, we can try to up our game in terms of communication. And certainly if you have specific questions for me, let me know what those are. But right now, the real key communication is with the engineer, because with those of you that need to provide an easement, that's what, that's really critical because those properties are going to be directly impacted. So, and everybody that's not directly impacted will have some impact in the neighborhood, of course, from construction, but you won't have that direct impact and you're going to get a lot of benefit. So, any other general questions? Yes, sir.
Originally, when Chris came out and talked to us, we talked about a concrete pipe. Now that it's,
You mean a concrete channel was the original?
no, it was a concrete pipe, 10-foot concrete pipe that was a smooth bore, because even the fan guy said that that's what they were talking about doing. So with it being a steel pipe, I don't have to worry about my tractor squishing it or anything.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, there must be a miscommunication. It was never a concrete pipe, but with the steel pipe and the cover over the pipe and the way the pipe is constructed with the bedding and the backfill, it'll be able to take H20 loading. So yeah, your tractor would not be a problem whatsoever.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, you bet.
And it's fairly deep in most areas. right?
In most places, but yeah, the bedding and the backfill of the pipe and the cover over the pipe really determines the loading that we can put on it. So yeah, we're very cognizant of that. Yes.
Good question. Other questions, general questions? Do you have anything else? Well, thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for hanging in there with us. It's always a race and a long road to get through this process. And, as we work through this, we'll be doing the updates. And, if you have specific questions, again, please get with Chris and Nick and Rick this tonight and Mike as well. Questions. And try to answer those questions. And hopefully we can secure the easements and move forward. So thank you again. Appreciate you coming out.